Hello again, YouTube. Well, I'm back. Yes, it's been a while since I put out a video. Couple of reasons for that. One, as I may have said before, I'm the sort of content creator that I only make content when I've got content worth making. So I don't just, I try not to just bang videos out for the sake of banging out videos. I've also been away. I went to Scotland for a week with my mate, which was pretty good. But now I'm fully back with it and back with the training. So, and God, do I need to train after that Scotland trip. Anyway, what I want to talk about today is a bit of an issue I've had with the On1 Freeranger. A couple of weeks ago, it developed a really annoying noise on a Sunday ride. And I followed my usual kind of fault-finding procedure to isolate the noise and find out where it was coming from. Now, I did think I'd narrowed it down to either the shoes, cleats, pedals, something like that. I've got a basic fault-finding process that I follow when I get a noise on a bike, and it goes like this. Firstly, isolate the noise to one of the component groups. So is it coming from the frame? Is it coming from the wheels? Or is it coming from the drivetrain? There are certain noises that should not be ignored. And generally, noises coming from your frame should not be ignored. I learnt that lesson, and you saw it a couple of videos ago, like this. Equally, I'd say a noise coming from your wheels needs urgent investigation, because that could be a spoke on its way out. It could be, even as a guy I used to ride with, one Sunday discovered a cracked rim, and he'd been riding on it merrily for some time, and it was making an odd noise, and it wasn't until we both stopped, had a coffee and a look at it, and realised that he really should be getting a cab home. And then, of course, you've got the drivetrain. In my experience, noises from the drivetrain are just the really annoying ones, like this one that I got. So the way that I isolate it is that the first thing I'll do is stop pedalling. Because if you stop pedalling and the noise goes away, you know the noise is probably coming from the drivetrain. And that's easy to establish, because if the wheels are going round and you're not getting noise every rotation of the wheels, it's definitely not the wheels. So you haven't got a brake disc rubbing or a brake pad rubbing or a bearing going in a wheel or even a spoke on its way out. So you've isolated that. But what I found was this noise was coming from the drivetrain. And it was happening once every pedal rotation. And it was happening at the same point in the pedal rotation. Now, the way that I work that out is unclip each side and just pedal with one leg. Because then you can kind of narrow it down to a side at least, which was what kind of threw me off on a tangent, because having narrowed it down to one side, I thought it was possibly shoe, cleat, pedal related, but I don't think it actually is. And by sort of like doing these things, you are homing in on it. So after today's ride, where I spent a long period after my mate had left me just riding around and unclipping and doing various things, I'd narrowed this down to, okay, look, I've cleaned the cleats, I've changed the shoes, I've oiled the springs in the pedals and everything like that. I'm sure it's not cleat and pedal related. So given that it's happening once every crank rotation, and it's not a noise that happens when there's no load on it, so you take the bike off, put it in the stand, spin the cranks, there's absolutely no noise at all. It's something that's getting loaded and making a noise when it's loaded. So that to me says bottom bracket. And here's the thing about a gravel bike. That bottom bracket leads a harder life than your standard road bike. And I have definitely used this thing on the trails, as you've seen from some of the other videos. This thing has not been a stranger to a bit of mud. So obviously, you've got a bottom bracket there, which is, I guess, kind of fairly close to road configuration for a bottom bracket. And it's living the hard life that a mountain bike bottom bracket lives. So to me, the most obvious thing is you've got some crap in there or something. So today I set about taking the bottom bracket apart and having a good look in there. And this is what I found. Okay, so I've looked at everything obvious, such as the pedals. It's definitely not the pedals making a sound. Oddly, the bottom bracket feels loose enough actually, but I'm just going to slip it out and take it all apart, because to me the only place that sound can be coming from is the bottom bracket. So you'll have to forgive me here. I'm not very experienced with SRAM bottom brackets and cranks, having never taken one apart before. So this is going to be interesting. Understand what we've got here is a 10mm cap, and inside an 8mm bolt. Now the 8mm bolt holds the crank arm on, and it bears against the cap to become self-extracting. Well, let's give this a go. I think that's my 8. Whoa, that's going to be tight. Christ. No, I think I'm going to do damage. I'm going to put the bike on the ground. There you go. Right. Loose. There we go. That worked nicely. Nice bit of design, SRAM. Have a look in here. Well, that's nicely greased. That don't look too bad. Right, there we go. Let's take that seal off. Have a feel in there. You know, that all looks pretty good, but we will clean it nonetheless. Now, right, so I can tell you, there is nothing wrong with that bearing at all. Let's have a look. Oh man! Right, the drive side, however, is a different deal. Now, let's see if I can take you in on that. Now, as hopefully you can see from that, there is quite a bit of accumulated crap around the drive side. So, I think what I'm going to do is completely clean this whole bottom bracket, re-grease it, and hopefully the noise goes away, because yeah, that, do you know what, that could well be the source of the noise. Oh, there you go, I just heard it. Man, talk about gritty. Right, now on this side you've got kind of a little top hat that sits inside that I believe is a reducer. So it reduces the internal diameter down to the size that's needed for the bearing. Now that to me looks like it's almost designed to trap crap. Do you know what? I think that is the source of the trouble, the source of the noise. So this is the little top hat out of the drive side, and all that's there for, I believe, is to give you a little bit of sealing, but also to do a little bit of reduction on the internal diameter. But really, I think probably what it's best at is just catching crap. Now, I'm going to use some WD to clean this, but I'm not going to spray it liberally into there, because what I don't want is to get WD actually inside the bearing and have it to start degreasing the bearing for me. So I'm just cleaning this race as much as I possibly can, and this side is pretty good. Notwithstanding that, we'll give it another clean. Right. Now, I think I can start putting this back together. Let's not overlook the obvious. And let's make sure that the cranks are clean before we put them back. Time, I think, for copious amounts of grease. Thank you. And while we're at it, given that the sound did sound like it was coming from the non-drive side, let's just make sure this little space is nice and clean and greasy it. Right. Now, let's make sure we put this on right. That looks good. So I'm not sure if the camera got it before the battery died, but I have torqued this to 50 Newton meters. And then the external cap, the 10mm, is actually only 12 to 15 Newton meters. So I'm just going to leave that as is, because that was completely untouched. Given that I'd narrowed the noise down to just one side, and once every pedal revolution, it did strike me that the problem could be pedals. So one of the first things I tried to do to fix the problem was clean and grease all the springs in these old SPD pedals here, because the having ridden it off-road quite extensively, the springs were getting quite rusty. So I've just made sure that they are all nice and lovely. The only other thing I'm going to do, now that I've serviced the bottom bracket, is I'm just going to make sure that the pedals are actually tight. So I actually think that the noise in this case was definitely bottom bracket related, and to me it feels like the drive side, even though the noise kind of is louder, you know, or more pronounced when you're pedaling on the non-drive side. And I guess there's kind of a haphazard logic on that, because if you think about where the crank is, you know, if you pedal on this end and you've got a bearing failing at this end, there's probably just a little bit more flex in the crank than when you press down on this side. That's my haphazard sort of O-level physics there. Somebody will doubtless correct me on that. But yeah, I definitely think, having inspected the bottom bracket, that noise is coming from the drive side. I've taken it all apart and I've cleaned it as best I can, and I've put it back together, you know, re-greased it, and we'll see where we go with it. Now, at this point, for disclosure, I have not ridden the bike, so I don't know if I've got rid of the noise. So there will be a part 2, a follow-up on this, to let you know how I went with that. I've just got some thoughts around that bottom bracket though, because you know, this is in a gravel bike, and I think, as I showed you in that that section where I was taking it all apart, on the drive side you've got that little top hat reducer in there, and it's not sealed in any way. You know, the only thing that's keeping the water and crap out of that is, I guess, a bit of grease. And it's in an area that's going to live a very hard life on a gravel bike if you use a gravel bike like it's intended. So I'm wondering if that GXP bottom bracket is indeed the best one for the bike. And maybe a follow-up to this will be exploring some different bottom brackets that I could put in there that might just be a little bit more up to the off-road nature of the bike, as well as, you know, just being a decent bottom bracket to use on the road. So thanks for watching this one, YouTube. I hope not to leave it so long to make another video in future. And as I say, I think there's going to be a follow-up on this, because if it is that bottom bracket, I'm definitely going to be looking at some options that I could put in there, because I think that that would be a useful upgrade. I'll take nothing away from Planet X. They fitted the SRAM drivetrain and they fitted a standard SRAM bottom bracket that goes with it. It's just, to my mind, I wonder if that bottom bracket, given that design, is the best bottom bracket for the bike, given the nature of riding that you will probably end up doing with it. So anyway, thanks for watching this one, YouTube. I'll catch you in the next.